I can't believe it's the end of October next week already. Quiz number 2, lion's share of the quiz, I guess 3/4 is on accounting. So please be prepared to set up, a balance sheet, income statements, and know about the financial indicators and actually what they mean. So anyone can take a ratio of numbers, but the key thing is make a recommendation based on the numbers that you actually calculate. Understand what they mean, like we've talked about in lecture, and then possibly a little bit of cost accounting, but mostly on the financial accounting side of things. And then on chapter 3, just the compound interest that we've talked about, and then the 3 theories, and obviously present and future value, so geometric, gradient, and annuity, which is the 5-pointer business analysis using those formulas. Be comfortable with compound interest. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I guess over the next couple of lectures, is just round up the toolbox of things that we need to analyze engineering projects. So I want to talk about inflation, and I want to talk about mortgages and bonds, and then probably, I guess early next week, we'll start talking about engineering projects and how we go about analyzing them. We'll be doing that on a before tax basis, and then we'll start talking about income tax, and then sort of finalize the analysis in terms of after return. Okay, so let me just very quickly talk about this slide here. We've really done this a number of times, where we look at cash flows through the cash flows in the future, and we're asking the question, well, what's it worth today? Formal definition is equivalence. Two cash flows are equivalent if their present values at some interest rate, if the present values are the same. Okay. And remember, present value has a couple of interpretations, right? One is, if I have a future obligation, the present value of that obligation is how much cash I need to fund its position today to satisfy that, assuming that I can earn whatever the interest rate here is, 6%. The other view is if I'm looking at an engineering project in a series of positive cash flows, the present value of that is essentially what that project is worth and how much value that adds above the opportunity cost. And so this is just a reference here to show you a couple of very, very different cash flows, which you think couldn't possibly be equivalent, but because, of course, their present values of 6% are the same, we deem them to be equivalent. So from a value point of view, we really are indifferent in terms of those investments. I mean, we may be concerned about the timing of the cash flows, but from a value point of view, we're willing to pay the same amount for each of those returns. They're equivalent. And that's, when we look at different investments, we're going to be looking at it from that point of view. We take the one with the highest present value, and then if they're equivalent, then we look at intangible factors. So I want to just extend this. It's quite similar to what we talked about when we talked about future value and opportunity cost. So let's talk about an engineering project and just make sure that everyone is on side in terms of, well, what's it mean for a present value of a project to be greater than 0? Why is that a good project? And we get this notion of, again, if it's a good project, we're going to leave the shareholders or the investors wealthier at the end of the project. And let's just make sure that those two are equivalent. So if we have a positive present value, it's a good project, i.e., when we're finished, we're going to be wealthy. Okay, let me just look at this project now. And it's a web server system, so we're looking at it. And again, end of year 0, these are all projections, right? As an engineer, we're trying to decide, should we do this? What's the rate of return? Or what's the present value? End of year 0, we have the acquisition of the server system itself, the hardware, for $120,000. And remember, engineers have to basically determine the planning period, which is tied to the economic life of the asset. So an engineer says, okay, this equipment will last 5 years, at which time it'll be too costly to keep. We're going to get rid of it. Okay. And when we get rid of it, there's a salvage value, what we think we'll get for it reasonably 5 years from now. We've got maintenance and internet charges, basically annual, so let's say operating and maintenance expense. And of course, we've got programmers working on this thing, making it work, so we've got arms and legs and salaries, basically $40,000 a year that people working on this. And then we need to say, well, why are we doing it? Well, remember, financial analysis looks at cash, right? So this is the cash benefits. So, boss thinks it's strategic, boss thinks it's a great idea. Well, show me the cash if we're doing this analysis initially. This may be, well, if we're going on the web, maybe we don't have to send out as many catalogs because our catalog is online. Or maybe if we have an automated order entry system that customers can order online, we can fire a few of our telemarketers or the folks that are taking orders over the phone. Those are cash flow benefits. If we have additional sales, perhaps the profits associated with that will factor as well. So that's the economic side. Then when we look at those numbers, you know, if it's not really a good project, then we ask perhaps, well, is it strategic? Are there other reasons we would do it because we want to be somewhere a few years from now? But initially, it's economic. So we're looking at cash flow benefits, things that are tangible in the first phase. Okay, well, we've got the data. And sometimes drawing a cash flow diagram, this one's sort of perhaps confusing because there's too much on it, but it's sometimes helpful because remember, time is important. Negative cash flows, again, investment by the company. Positive cash flows, return to the company. And again, everything's done at the end of the year. So I've got end of year zero, beginning of the project, $120,000 investment in the equipment. I show my positive benefits of $100,000 a year. I show my salvage value, and then I show the cost. If I now ask the question, well, what's it worth? Well, I'm going to look at the timing, and so this is where our present value analysis comes in. So we're saying, let's ask, what is all of that equivalent to right now? Okay. Well, end of year zero is the present value. So basically, I've got these various things that collapse to $50,000 a year positive, plus the $10,000 salvage value 5 years from now, and an initial cost of $120,000. So about $76,000. What's less than the investment? But remember, we've included the investment in that, right? So this return, or the way to look at it, is the positive, or the net positive cash flow, revenue minus cost, which are these guys here, return $76,000 more than the investment. It's a good project. Okay. And now I want to just look at it. So our definition, present value greater than zero, means that we're getting a return that's greater than the cost of capital, which is 10% here. This is a good project. But now I want to say, well, is that for sure? Well, let's have a look and see if this investor, I'm just going to look at net cash flow here. Sometimes we just want to collapse everything and look at the net cash flows. Okay. And this often tells me exactly what it's about. Well, for $120,000 investment now, I get a net benefit of $50,000 a year and a little bit of salvage value. Okay. So I can value that as well. So this is our net cash flow, revenue minus cost. And so I've got those $50,000 annuity for 5 years, and I've got the salvage value T given out for this 5 years from now. So the present value of the future returns, that's what I was alluding to on the previous overhead, essentially $195,000. I'm getting that for a 120 investment, so on $76,000. It's a good project. But let's say an investor didn't agree, okay, and said, I could do better. Well, assuming the 10% opportunity cost. So let's look at it. If the investor said, I don't want to invest in this, how wealthy would that investor be if they took their $120,000 and put it in an opportunity cost investment? In other words, 10% somewhere else. So we're measuring this based on what the investor can do elsewhere. So if I do that, I'm going to compare how this progresses in terms of adding value versus the opportunity cost investment. So two options. $120,000, either buy the equipment, you have no money left, of course, and wait for those cash flows to come in, assuming the engineer has done a good forecast, or take the $120,000 and put it in, for the sake of argument, a 10% bank account, or somewhere that will generate 10% here. And let's see whether or not this project is better. Okay, so those are my two options. This bank account really represents the opportunity cost investment. In other words, 10% compounded per year. And hopefully, after looking at sort of compound interest, you're comfortable with that calculation. In the sense that in the first year, there's 120, 10% of that is $12,000 interest. So there's 132 at the end of year one. That will grow at 10%, $13,200 worth of interest, and so on. Over the 5 years, it will grow to $193,000. That's the future value of the opportunity cost investment. Okay. Now we say our project's better. Okay. Well, I hope it is, in the sense that present value is greater than zero. Well, what happens? Well, think about what happens. You got that $120,000. Immediately you spend it on the web server equipment. So you got no cash left. You got a piece of equipment with earning potential. Well, in the first year, we go back to the net cash flow. If I've got revenue minus costs, I got 100 coming in, I've got 50 going out, so I've got a net of 50. Right? And again, we always assume that when that 50 comes in, we have the opportunity to reinvest at 10%. Okay. But it comes in at the end of year one. Okay, so at the end of year one, I've got 50,000 available for reinvestment at 10%. So during year two, think about beginning of year two, I got 50 grand. I'm investing it somewhere, getting 10% minimum. Therefore, I get $5,000. And I get the second 50 grand from operations in this project coming in at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, I've got 105. Well, I then have another 50 coming in, another 50, another 60, but on the accumulated balance, I'm earning 10% profit. Okay. And so in year 5, I've got the 50 from operations and 10 from salvage. Okay. So my future value is $315,000 from this project. In other words, if the engineer has been accurate in the forecast, spending that 120 will generate $315,000 at the end of the project. That is better, 522 grand, than the opportunity cost investment. It's a good project because the shareholder is going to be wealthier than wherever else they would go and get this 10%. And it's deterministic in the sense that, remember, with equivalence, I can now ask the question, well, if I've got $315,000 5 years from now, what's it worth to me today at 10%? Well, isn't that my P given out? Okay. So if I find out that this future value, in other words, what it's worth 5 years from now is 315, okay, and I want to ask the question, how much better is the investor off? Well, 121 extra. Then that is my $75,000 that I determined initially. So the fact that it's $75,000 better initially means that it will grow to F given P, 10% on the 5 on 75,000. That's how much better this project is beyond the opportunity cost investment. So oftentimes when people see a project that says net present value equals 0, you're saying, hey, that's a horrible project. Well, it isn't. That returns exactly the opportunity cost, 10%. Anything beyond net present value equals 0 is better. Okay, so our break-even point or point of indifference is going to be the present value equals 0. Anything greater results in greater wealth. Okay. So this is the way that we're going to be looking at engineering projects when we look at chapter 4. Okay. I want to now talk about, I guess, these topics that we need to still cover. So mortgages, and then we'll talk about inflation, and then we'll talk about bonds. Okay. And then we'll finish up and simply start looking at engineering projects. I want to talk a little bit about how to do mortgages or loan payments. But I'd like to spend much more time talking about banks and the risk associated with these transactions and how banks mitigate risk. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the subprime crisis as well, and how that sort of happened and what the ramifications were. But let's talk about the mechanics of this first. Pretty straightforward. It's just an application of the annuity formula with some terminology. Key thing is that when I make a loan, when I borrow money, I have usually an expectation to make profit. If I have a reasonable chance of making a profit, Revenue Canada allows me to deduct the interest. Okay, so we'll say that reduces the amount of taxes that I pay. When I'm paying back the loan, I can't deduct that. So as I'm making payments, I want to know, well, what's the interest? So I can report to Revenue Canada and reduce my taxes. Okay, so that's one of the things I want to know. These sorts of loans, essentially, I'm paying back the loan. So think about there's two types of loans. There's a line of credit. So if you're in business, you can go to the bank manager and say, I want a line of credit, and I don't really have to pay it back. Okay, well, eventually I do, obviously, but each month, as long as I'm paying the interest, I'm okay. That's one type of loan, a line of credit. And think about a company that's a small company and they want to have $200,000 of debt in their capital structure. Well, they go line of credit, pay the interest on that, don't have to pay it back. This type of loan, though, is basically one that I pay back. So there's a period of time over which I'm going to extinguish my debt. All the while, of course, I'm paying interest on what I still owe. So I've got a number of definitions here. The principal amount, simply the amount that I borrow. Okay. And I'm going to use a housing example. And let's say I have to borrow $250,000 to buy a house. Well, the principal is $250,000. Okay. Amortization period, well, there's two periods really to be concerned about here. Amortization, just a fancy word for spreading out payments over a period of time. So the amortization period is, how long is it going to take for me to pay that back? Many home mortgages are spread out over 25 years. So make a monthly payment every month for the next 25 years, and the place is yours. Okay. That determines the payment. Now, banks will usually not commit, well, they'll never commit to a certain interest rate for 25 years because it's simply too risky for them. I will get a mortgage from a bank which will have a term. Okay? And that term is basically the contract that says they will lend me the money for a fixed period of time at a certain interest rate. Many folks like the security of a 5-year term. So I borrow at 4%, let's say, for 5 years. That interest rate is locked in for the next 5 years. At the end of that, of course, I still owe money, and then I usually have to get another mortgage unless I won the lottery or gotten rich, and can pay that off. And then whatever interest rate at that time prevail will then dictate the next interest rate on that term. Okay. I can get a 1-year mortgage, I can get a 2-year mortgage, I can get a floating mortgage, where interest just goes up and down. And depending on what I think, which way interest rates are going, I may decide to go short if I think interest rates are going down, or if I think they're going up, I'm going to go long. Okay. It's up to the investor, okay. Or the borrower, I should say. Okay. Now, so there's 2 periods. 25 years to pay the house mortgage back, and then the term of the contract itself, the mortgage itself, anywhere from 5 years, well, up to 5 years. Now, since we're paying back, think about every payment that I make, I got to cover the interest. But if I only cover the interest, I'm never going to pay it back, so there has to be an equity portion. In other words, the portion that's contributing to reducing my indebtedness. Okay, so the first thing that comes off my payment is the interest. What's left over reduces my indebtedness. So that's called a blended payment. Okay, so if I have if I'm making a $1,000 payment, and the interest for that month is $800, well, $200 has reduced my indebtedness. The 800 is taken for it. So that $200 is referred to equity. Again, equity just means ownership position, and the rest of it is interest. Now, these type of loans where we're actually paying it back, we've got 2 terms. One is a mortgage. A mortgage simply means that the loan is backed by physical assets, by collateral. And the bank, if I don't make the terms of, if I don't pay back, if I don't make the terms of the mortgage, they can come in, they can secure the house, and basically sell it. So it's a process that can't kick you out immediately, but there's a process, a legal process they follow where they can foreclose on your mortgage and essentially evict you and sell it for the amount that you owe. A debenture is something that doesn't involve collateral. So a debenture I can issue based on the financial strength of my company, let's say. So University of Toronto, for example, went up to the bond market. We are strong, and so we didn't have to pledge the engineering building of Robarts to get the money, right? Because if we didn't pay, well, then there's no engineering building, and we're in trouble. And Robarts less of a problem, perhaps, but engineering building for sure. We wouldn't want to pledge that. We're so strong that we said we promise to pay you back. We're not going to secure it with anything. And though people that are lending us the money say, okay, fine, well, that's a debenture. Okay. So a debenture has no security other than the earning potential of the company and the financial strength of the issuing firm or the company. And therefore, if you don't pay, you're in a much better situation because you can go into bankruptcy protection. You can basically stall your creditors for quite a while, and you have some breathing room. If you pledge your asset and you don't pay, they can come in very, very quickly and take it and put you out of business. So if you can get away with it, you never, ever, ever pledge any securities as collateral or any physical asset as collateral. But if you're a small business, of course, you can't get away with that. You have to pledge your personal asset as well as all of your business assets. Okay. So these are just the terms that we're going to use to describe it. Okay. Now I want to just start with a very simple example to get a sense of, well, how do we determine the payment? Okay. A $10,000 loan, and I'm going to pay it back in 4 years. Yeah. And again, there's a bank view, the money they're lending, so it's negative as far as the bank is concerned, and the payments come in, they're positive. Flip side, of course, is the borrower's view, where the $10,000 is positive, and the 4 payments are negative because they're making payments. So I'm showing you the bank view. Okay. Well, we've got this notion of equivalence, right? Or funded position. And so I can just basically say, well, what's the present value of a payment over the next 4 years? What's the A? And that will tell me, essentially, what's equivalent to $10,000 now and some interest rate. So the payment itself is simply an application to the annuity formula. I want to borrow $100,000, and I want to turn that into a 4-period annuity. That's equivalent to $10,000. So A given B, I want the annuity to give the present value 10% times 4. Okay. So for 3155, I should be able to pay the interest, and I should be able to pay back the loan because they're equivalent. Okay. And indeed, that's the case. Just think about what's the future value of this. Well, hopefully it's 0, right? I don't owe anything at the end, right? So if I ask the question of that cash flow series, what's the value of this at the end of year